Greetings, book lovers everywhere, and welcome to E-Train Talks. I'm your host, E-Train. I'm a 13-year-old literacy advocate, book lover, and founder of E-Train Talks Inc., a nonprofit dedicated to ending book deserts and, changing the world one book at a time, which is the best way to change the world. So, enough about me, because I have an amazing guest with me today. I am here with a phenomenal person who does incredible things for the book world. Seriously, I'm beyond thrilled to share that joining me today is a librarian legend, a literacy hero, an author, and a role model, to thousands upon thousands of teachers, authors, and children from all over. I can't even tell you how excited I was when I heard that I had the chance to interview John Schu. That's right, we have John Schu with me today, who on social media is Mr. Schu Reads. He goes by Mr. Schu, John, and takes the form of Jake in his book, Louder Than Hunger, which we'll be talking about today. So thank you so much for joining me today, John. I'm super honored that you're here.
Oh, thank you so much. And I'm super honored to be here. And I'm so proud of you. And I'm so grateful for everything that you do to spread the good word about literacy and reading and writing. And I love how you share your heart through the things that you're excited about. So I am honored to be here with you today. And I look forward to our conversation.
Me too. Yeah, so for those who don't know, John Schu has written some incredible stories, both picture books, this is the school here, and also he wrote Louder Than Hunger, which is sort of like a memoir, but, he takes a new form, a new character, a new name, but really it all comes back to the heart, as we talked about earlier, which we'll also talk about in the interview. So I'm super excited to celebrate your journey because some people have called me a mini you, but I think that's just the greatest compliment in the world because you're such an
Oh,
incredible person. You do amazing things for the literacy world, and it warms my heart that people even think I'm somewhat close to the amazingness that you are.
no, ditto, ditto. You're incredible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, so without further ado, my first question for you is: not only are you a librarian, which in itself is amazing, librarians are the best, but you've gained a huge name for yourself in the book world. You're an ongoing literacy advocate. You also had a book blog, which you run, and you share cover reveals, book trailers, reveals of so many amazing bookish things, and even run your own podcast. You do a lot of things, so I'm going to try and narrow it down here. You shared countless cover reveals of your books. You run your own podcast. You have lectures, keynote speaking, school and classroom visits, writing, teaching. I don't know how you juggle all this. I don't know how
Oh,
you make
that's
time.
making me tired. That's making me tired, E-Train, saying all the things I do,
Yes.
which
So
I
with
do.
with so much of your life devoted to books, can you share how this all started with you? Have you
Yeah.
always been a lover of stories?
Yeah, I've always loved libraries. I've always loved stories. I think I developed my love of reading and my love of story and my love of the physical book from my grandmother. And I know you've already read Louder Than Hunger, and thank you for all of your support of the book. And you
So
posted one of the first video book talks, and I love it so, so much. And you were probably the first person under the age of 30 to read Louder Than Hunger. And we're thinking, yes, it's resonating with middle schoolers and high schoolers. So thank you for that. And so you've read Louder Than Hunger. And so you know that there's a book that Jake, the main character, who's based on my own experiences, loves, which is Goofy's Big Race. And when I think about my journey to becoming a reader, I always go back to that book. And because I'm here in my home office, I can actually show you the actual copy that my grandma
Whoa.
bought for me from the grocery store in the year 1986. And I know that she bought this for me in the year 1986 because in the book she wrote Johnny E. Edward is my middle name, Schumacher, September 1986. And my
Wow.
grandma bought Goofy's Big Race for me from the grocery store. At that time in the 80s, almost every week you could buy a new book from the grocery store in the town where I grew up. And this one really, really resonated with my heart because I was a kid who was always a little bit anxious. I was a kid who always tried to rush through things. And there was a refrain in this book, which is slow and steady, steady and slow. That's the way we always go. And my grandma would repeat that to me all the time. So when I think about how I became a reader, why I love books so much, it often goes right back to Goofy's Big Race. And then the second book that I always think about, E-Train, is a book that I'm reading in this photograph that I'm holding. And in this photograph, for those who aren't seeing the video, there's 7-year-old me on my waterbed. And I write about the waterbed in Louder Than Hunger. There's 7-year-old me lying on my water bed with listening to my Walkman while my cat Jessie is perched on my chest. And the book that I'm reading is Oliver and Company, which is a novelization of the movie Oliver and Company. So many of the books that turn me into a reader, E-Train, are what we would call media properties, like books from the Walt Disney collection and then books based on movies. So I am living walking proof that those types of books turn us into lifelong readers.
Absolutely. And now that with these recommendations, I think that I know what books I'm going to get next from Amazon or, anywhere books are sold. Maybe indie bookstores, maybe?
Yeah. Well, both of those books are out of print. So the only
Oh,
place you could get those is on eBay.
all right, eBay. That's the last resort.
No.
All right. So, moving to your work as a children's librarian, you are the
Yeah,
librarian for Bookelicious. I mean, let's
that's
just take a
correct.
moment to just adore that name because that is a
It is
lovely
great.
name. And so, it's a website that celebrates children's books, and it just sounds like such a fun job. I mean, granted, you do so many other things, but just coming back to being a librarian, and it just sounds like a fun and important job. So,
Yeah.
I guess, how did you first get involved with this book loving organization?
Yeah, so I love Bookelicious and I love the name as well. And it was actually founded, the founder is Leanne Borders, and she lives in the same state as you, California. She lives in San Francisco, and her husband, Louis Borders, started Borders Books. And E-Train, I don't know if you're familiar with Borders Books, but
Yeah.
in the 80s and 90s, Borders was very, very popular.
Mhm.
And when I was a teenager, the town that I lived in, we always had two choices. You could go to Barnes and Noble, you could go to Borders. And depending upon my mood, I would go to Borders if I was in one mood, and I would go to Barnes and Noble if I was in another mood. And as an adult, I've learned that the reason that I was drawn to Borders is because it felt like an independent bookshop to me. Even though it was no longer independent, it had that community feel that you always get in an independent bookstore. And in my opinion, oftentimes booksellers and independent bookshops are a little bit more welcoming and a little bit more warm. And that's the experience that I had. And so when Leanne Borders, whose husband started Borders Books, one of my favorite bookshops, reached out to me for a meeting, I was really, really excited. And then when I learned more about the platform, which you talked a little bit about, which is that it's an online bookseller, and it's a resource that has book collections, and it has programs, and it has events for teachers and teacher librarians and students. And I actually E-Train do all of my school visits through Bookalicious. So it's been a very good partnership, and I'm proud of the work they do.
Now, let's turn our attention to this book right here, Louder Than Hunger. So, pointing on Zoom is weird, but I hope I got that right.
No, you got it. I saw it.
So
Well, it was right up from my angle.
yeah. So, Louder Than Hunger is written as a novel in verse, which is a new style for you for your writing. You going from writing picture books, you also wrote a prose novel for adults, and now you have a novel in verse. So, how was this transition for you? Do you think it was difficult or easier than expected?
Yeah, it was actually natural. When you see this as a school, the way it looks in the book, it might not look like a poem, but if you were to put the because it is a poem, if you were to put it back together, you'd see it's a six stanza poem. And then my book, This Is a Story, if you put it back together, you'll see that it's a five stanza poem. And I love that a teacher librarian and someone who also teaches at Rutgers, like I do, Jennifer Lagarde, when she read it, she wrote me and said, is this a poem? And I said, yes. And she put it back together, like almost exactly the way that I wrote it. So both of those books are poetry. And then my book, The Gift of Story, which you mentioned, is my book for adults. And this one is not poetry, but it's written kind of in a poetic way. And the day after I finished writing, revising The Gift of Story, which I turned in 2.5 years late, I was so I was feeling so relieved that I'm done. I'm done with this big project that has been over my head for like over 4 years. And I thought I would take a long break and I wouldn't write for a very long time. But the very next day after I finished revising The Gift of Story, Jake started talking to me. And I opened my notebook, and I always write in notebooks that don't have lines. And I think that really helps me with the poetry because I can play with the page.
Mm-hmm.
And I very quickly wrote 10 poems. And I recently looked back, and those 10 poems, those first 10 poems that I wrote, are almost exactly the way they appear in the book. But those poems don't come until around page 100 now. The book used to open, E-Train, where Jake is hospitalized. And then
Oh,
the whole book, the whole first draft, was told in flashback. And the opening poem, that is now like I write my name over and over again, used to fall on page 91. And I realized like I didn't have the book in the right order. And that's one of the beautiful things about poetry, about novels and verses. I think you can more easily move things around and they make
right.
sense. So I can only imagine Jake's story, my story, being told in verse. The white space and the margins really helped me with a more challenging topic. And I love that sometimes the poems are 4 words, sometimes they're 10 pages. And
Right.
something I realized right away when I was writing this book is that we have a character who doesn't feel as though he's worthy of taking up space in the world. He
Mm.
feels unworthy of life in so many ways, but he can take up space on the page. And poetry, I think, helps him do that. Yeah,
Yeah.
poetry helps him speak through his heart.
Mhm. Poetry, I feel like I know people say that like the eyes are the window to the soul, but I feel like poetry is also a window to the soul. How you write, how your poetry
Yeah,
comes out in writing, it's so soul driven, so heart
it
driven.
is. Yeah. Well, I didn't, I was lucky enough to do 6 events with Catherine Applegate
Oh wow.
in what month was it? In April, right after Louder Than Hunger came out. And
Oh,
I love presenting with her. She's so amazing. And this one day we had to do 4 presentations. And by the fourth one, like I was getting so giddy. And I don't know, I was just saying everything that was coming to my mind, which I often do anyway. And I shared with Catherine Applegate that recently I only started to respond to emails that inspired poetry. And I have found that in my everyday writing, I am Jake. Something I want to go back and say is the main character in Louder Than Hunger, his name is Jake Edward Stacy, and my name is John Edward Schu, and we have the same initials, and that's intentional. And before we started recording, I shared with you that the reason that I named him Jake is because when I was a kid, I really, really wished my name were Jake. And thankfully, John and Jake start with the same letter. And so I was able to do the same initials. But where was I going with this? Yeah, like I just feel like poetry, when I'm inspired to tell something through poetry, my heart, my soul is more open. And I feel that I'm able to put a better, I don't know, a better worded message out into the world.
absolutely. Yeah,
That was a bit
poetry.
rambly, sorry.
No, it's okay. Yeah, I love that answer. Poetry is amazing. And so, continuing with the novel in verse topic, I love the genre. There's so many novels in verse that are, they're so profound. But I feel like Louder Than Hunger truly stands out. Not just the topics that it represents and discusses, but also the writing style. Like it's still novel in verse, but like you said, there can be 4 words in a poem, or there can
Mm,
be 10 pages. So Louder Than Hunger, it stands out because, as you said, it's not always packed with words, but every
mm.
word is powerful and presented in a way that keeps the reader's attention. So, I'm curious, how much say did you have in the typeset and style of
Oh.
your story?
Oh, that is such a good question. I have done, I'm not exaggerating, like hundreds of interviews for this book, and no one has asked me that question. So thank you for being the first person to ask that.
Yeah.
The design was really, really important to me, like very important. Jake uses the page. I use the page. I write across the page. Jake's font gets so big that it takes up 2 pages.
Mhm.
And I know E-Train, a lot of editors would have tried to get Louder Than Hunger down to maybe like 200 pages or
Mhm.
250 pages. And they could have done that by changing some of the design elements that I naturally wrote into the manuscript. But thankfully, Candlewick, especially my brilliant editor, Susan Van Meter, saw and understood that it was very important for Jake to write in a certain way, for the words to flow in a certain way. And the design team really understood that that was important. And so thanks to the brilliant Maria T. Middleton, she played with different font styles, and they would send them to me and say, what do you think about this font for the voice? And what do you think about this font for when his grandma's writing or when Kella's writing? And it was always spot on because they really understood the heart of the manuscript, and they understood what Jake was trying to accomplish by using different font styles and font sizes. And I love when people have told me that it helped them better understand Jake's anxiety through some of those design choices. The design choice was really important.
Yeah. I feel like the styles, like when it comes to novels in verse, style is so important. It really tells a lot about the characters, and I think fonts are that way as well. So all the little, I guess, special, additions to the story, whether it's from style or from length, I think that's
Mm,
so important. It helps us connect, and as you said, one person or many people have emailed to you about saying it helps them understand Jake better with his
yeah.
anxiety. I totally understand that, and I felt
Yeah,
that.
and something I was thinking about when you were talking, E-Train, is the audiobook of Louder Than Hunger. I love the audiobook. It's narrated by Jeff Ebner. And when you're listening to it, you don't see that the voice is a different font, and you don't see the letter font, and you don't see the way the words move across the page, but you can feel them and you can hear them. He delivered the most brilliant performance, in my opinion, and I didn't think I'd be able to listen to the audiobook, and I'm grateful I did listen to it, and I had a catharsis listening to it, and I bawled listening to it, and I felt like I got to experience the story and my own story in a different way. So everyone out there, if you've not listened to the audiobook, I highly recommend it. I love when people have been listening to the audiobook and then experiencing the print version. And a lot of people, when they listen to the audio first, don't realize that it's a novel in verse.
Yeah, and I haven't looked into the audiobook, but I've talked to Jeff Empner, on
Oh,
social
you
media.
did?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought I was like, I missed his episode with you. You should have him on.
Oh, no,
He's
no, no.
brilliant.
Oh, no, no, I didn't interview him, I just talked with him on
Yeah,
social media.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So, he's yeah, he just seems like a really amazing person, and I think with
yeah,
audiobooks, it just takes, like I think I've talked to one audiobook narrator before, and, it's just so incredible the work that they do because it might sound like an easy job just reading a story, but the
yeah.
amount of effort, like, having to differentiate characters, differentiate tones of voice, it's so much work, but those who
It's
do it
hard.
yeah, I
Yeah,
don't think
I on the audiobook, I read the dedications and I read my author's note.
Mhm,
And I thought I could do the author's note in like one or two takes. It took me like 3 hours each train. And the reason it took so long is because I kept crying.
mhm,
And I said to the producer, why am I crying? I've read this aloud many times. I've lived this. And she said, because it's real. You're in the booth and it feels really real. And she gave me the most beautiful advice. She said, pretend that Dolly Parton is sitting next to you and she's encouraging you and she's sparkly and she's bringing sunshine. And pretending that Dolly Parton was sitting next to me really, really helped.
yeah. Dolly Parton, like, her imagination library just, like, going
I
with
know.
amazing.
She's like always behind me. Train is the Dolly Parton little golden book.
Mhm. Yeah,
So yeah, yeah, she does amazing work.
yeah, definitely, and something that I found very intriguing about stories told in verse is that, like Louder Than Hunger, the subject matter can be, and usually is, just it's emotional, it's sensitive, and it's deep. But reading the words in verse, it just seems to make serious topics, I guess, kind of not necessarily easier to digest because I found myself crying during reading Louder Than
Yeah,
Hunger. But it's just it feels easier, especially maybe for reluctant readers who might have
I agree.
struggles when it comes to reading prose. And
Yeah,
I guess, do you think that this is the case, that novels in verse, they can, while touching on the same topics or maybe similar topics as prose, they're still just, it can be a bit easier for more?
Yeah. What you just said is always my response to that question. So I'm gonna say ditto to you. That is it's so true. And when people see Louder Than Hunger, when some people see Louder Than Hunger, they're like, wait, that is way too thick. Like I don't think my brain can handle a book like that. And I don't try to downplay all of the work that it took to write this book, but just opening it up and showing them the white space, and that you can read the first 10 poems in 4 or 5 minutes. I try not to control the reader's experience. I appreciate that some people read it in one sitting, but I do think it requires some breaks as you're reading it. I see Louder Than Hunger as 5 acts. And if I were the person reading it, I would read one act maybe per day, just to like have some breathing room and some time away from it. But maybe that's because I needed a lot of breathing room when I was writing the book. And writing it in verse gave me that breathing room, that white space. The white space helped me so much, E-Train.
So, in Louder Than Hunger, your protagonist Jake quotes Emily Dickinson's famous poem, I'm Nobody, Who Are You? He repeats I'm Nobody to himself repeatedly. And it's, I'm just gonna take a second. It pulls on the heartstrings. It's so relatable to all the middle schoolers, all the kids, high
Yeah,
schoolers, even little ones who just sometimes feel like they are nobody. But
yeah,
as we follow Jake's journey, he grows into himself. But I think this question is more specifically about Emily Dickinson. So,
yeah.
have her poems really influenced your writing, and is she significant to your life as well as Jake's? I mean, Jake is you,
Yeah.
but I guess maybe not.
Yeah. I don't know exactly when I discovered Emily Dickinson. I want to say it was in fourth or fifth grade. It was probably in April when most people celebrate poetry.
Mhm.
I think it was on a bulletin board in my fourth or fifth grade teacher's classroom. And it's almost always the same portrait. I can only think of one portrait of Emily Dickinson. And something about her eyes as a kid really spoke to me. I was a kid who experienced a lot of sadness, and I could see a lot of sadness and relatability in her eyes. And I remember checking out a collection of poetry of hers when I was in elementary school, but I didn't like fully understand it. It felt like a lot of work to me, but something about the refrain of "I'm nobody, who are you? Nobody too," like that really resonated with me. And just like slow and steady, steady and slow, that's the way we always go. I used to repeat that over and over and over again, and sadly, repeating that would fuel what eventually became the voice in my head. So yeah, in elementary school, something about her photo really spoke to me. That poem spoke to me, and then when I was working on Louder Than Hunger, I read a lot of Emily Dickinson poems, and I visited Unabridged Books in Chicago a lot when I was working on the book, and that's why there's a scene in Louder Than Hunger where Jake goes to Unabridged Books.
Yeah.
And during a few of my trips to the bookstore E-Train, I would buy various Emily Dickinson books. So I have a lot of Emily Dickinson collections from Unabridged Books, which
Yeah.
was one of my favorite scenes to write in the book.
Yeah. Did you have to actually ask Bridge Books for permission to feature them in?
I no, I didn't, and they were so happy though. I was on NPR the week the book came out with Scott
Mhm.
Simon, and I talked about Unabridged Books during the interview, and they said that multiple people called the bookshop that morning and said, "There's a guy on NPR who's talking about your bookshop." And then I went to the bookshop and I bought copies for all the booksellers who were working that day, and they didn't want to accept the copies E-Train, but I kept saying, "Please, you must. This is very important to me." And then there's a K-8 building that's directly across from the bookshop, and every time I have a book come out, I buy 10 to 15 copies and donate them to that elementary middle school. And so I did that with Louder Than Hunger the week the book came out, where I bought 10 copies, which they then brought over to the school the following week. But yeah, they were really happy. And then the owner of the bookshop sent me a really beautiful email. So
Love that.
yeah, I didn't ask permission though.
So I love that in your story, it's made clear that while Jake has gone through his struggles, he still has, hobbies. He still has loves, and his love for theater, his love for stories, and he loves stories. He appreciates poetry, and along with sharing his appreciation of reading, of libraries, of stories, I think that Jake and you, or I guess
No,
you,
you can. It's
and
okay.
I,
I
yeah,
do the same, 18. I'm so grateful you're going back and forth. During presentations, I do it constantly. And I say to everybody in the audience, I'm going to go back and forth. That's because we're so tied together.
Right.
So yeah, no, thank
Yeah.
you. I appreciate that you're doing that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So
Yeah.
we all share a love of theater. And I know from your social media posts, you attend many plays and musicals. I can see the playbill. It's just, I love theater so much. And I'm honestly so envious of the amount of incredible plays and productions that you get to see. And so I guess, have you ever been involved in acting or the arts? Or do you, I guess, prefer
Yeah.
observing
I
rather?
thank you for asking this question, and I love that you love theater. I also see on your posts that you've been in productions. My psychologist really encouraged me to do theater in high school, but I didn't feel like confident enough. And my therapist kept saying, "But you could do like sound, stage crew," and I said no. But this is what I did instead. My very first job was at a theater, a
Oh,
regional theater called Drury Lane, and it was there for many, many years. And I was an usher there for 3 years. And it was the perfect role for me because I still got to be in a theater 3 to 4 times, a week, but I wasn't on the stage, but I interacted with the actors. And it was a regional theater that people would do subscriptions to. And in between subscriptions, they would do concerts. And the people I'm going to name, you probably won't know because sadly they've all passed away. But like I got to be an usher for Florence Henderson, who was the mom in the Brady Bunch, and I got to go to her
wow.
dressing room and bring her up, and Phyllis Diller and all of these people from from a long time ago, and I got to interact with them, and it really helped my confidence and my like speaking skills. So although I didn't work like on the stage, I was an usher at a regional theater for 3 years. Yeah.
So we've talked a lot about Louder Than Hunger, but now it is time for us to talk about your new story. That's right.
Yay!
John Schu has a new book coming out, a new picture book entitled Ruthie Rose's Big Idea. So can you give us a glimpse into this
Yeah.
story, what it's about, and when we can expect it on the shelves?
Yes. So Ruthie Rose's Big Idea is coming out March 2025,
Woo!
and I'm so excited for that book. And I wrote it in between drafts of Louder Than Hunger. I needed something lighter. I wanted to go back to the picture book world, and it really helped my heart to go to a more joyful story in
Mhm.
between drafts of Louder Than Hunger. And when you see the cover, there's these three kids who look so happy and they're so joyful. And some people who only know me for Louder Than Hunger will be like, wow, this guy writes very different types of books. And that I appreciate. So let me tell you what it's about. It's about a little girl named Ruthie Rose. And Ruthie Rose wakes up with a big, bright, beautiful idea, an idea that she must share with multiple people at her school, specifically people who allow her to put her big, bright, beautiful idea into action. And it's a book about poetry and possibilities. And spoiler alert, her big bright beautiful idea is to create a poetry space within her school.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, it was really fun to write. And I've already written the sequel to the book, but I'm not
Ooh.
allowed to talk about that because again, when I was working on Louder Than Hunger, I needed to work on a very different type of story. And so I worked on two books in the same universe while writing Louder Than Hunger.
So I also read about an incredible chance that you had, a chance of meeting in person the real
Oh.
one and only Ivan. So for those who don't know, One and Only Ivan is a Newbery Medal winning amazing middle grade story by Katherine Applegate, and you had the chance to actually meet the real one and only Ivan. So can you share how that came?
I did. I did. My life changed that. Well, one, my life changed the day I read The One and Only Ivan, and my life changed even more the day I met the real Ivan. And
Mhm.
that was arranged through Catherine Applegate. I'd become a huge ambassador for The One and Only Ivan. I was buying, 5 to 10 copies every single week, giving them away to strangers, book talking it everywhere that I went. And one day, Catherine Applegate emailed me and said, "Thank you so much for putting my children through college with all of your support of the one and only Ivan. And would you like to go to Zoo Atlanta, where Ivan was living at the time, and meet him and interview his caretaker?" And I, of course, said yes. And I got to spend 1 hour with the real Ivan. And let's see here. I know that the people that aren't watching the video won't see this, but this is a plush of Ivan that Catherine had sent me. And I took a
Love it.
literary road trip with this plush. And so, anyway, when I was at Zoo Atlanta with Ivan, I always tell students during experiences together that he ate 31 blueberries and he ate 2 oranges. And I went inside of Ivan's domain, inside of his bedroom, and I saw his stuffed animals and I saw his cardboard boxes and I saw his calendars. He loved calendars. And then I was asked this question, which was, John, did you bring a copy of the one and only Ivan with you to meet the real Ivan? And I, of course, said, yes, I never leave home without one. And I reached into my backpack and I took out a copy and then I put on a mask to protect Ivan from me. And then I went into a very, very small room and I stood very, very close to Ivan the gorilla. There were only bars in between us. And Ivan took his thumb and he put it into a small can of green paint and he made his mark inside of my book. And so I have a copy of Ivan with a little green smudge in it. And I always ask students, how do you think I felt? And they say, really, really happy. And sadly, E-Train, 2 weeks after I met Ivan the gorilla, he passed away. And it was discovered that Ivan only signed maybe 2 copies of the one and only Ivan, and I had one of them. And when the publisher HarperCollins found that out, they asked me if I would please mail my signed copy to New York City. And I did. I mailed off my copy, and they said, John, please write a Dear Reader letter, and one day we'll do something with it. And I waited and I waited and I waited. And finally, when the paperback edition came out, in the back of the paperback edition, E-Train, there's a letter, a Dear Reader letter that I wrote to you and I wrote to everybody who experiences this book. And then when you turn the page, it says to the one and only Mr. Schu. And then at the bottom, there's a copy. Oops, you can't really see it. There's a copy of Ivan's signature. And to this day, I've helped give away over 30,000 copies of this book because I
Wow.
love it so, so much. So yes, that was like a modified version of what I say during school visits.
I love that. That sounds like just
Yeah,
such a wonderful, such a, powerful experience. And
yeah.
I think the work that you do to promote One and Only Ivan, promote all these stories, it's so, so crucial, especially I know that in a time like this, middle grade stories definitely aren't getting the love that they need, that they really deserve, because middle
Yeah.
grade is it's the best. I love so many middle grade stories, and the work that you do is so, so crucial. And I think it's so incredible that you had the chance to write a Dear Reader because I love Dear Reader messages,
Me too.
back or front of the books. And
Well, and I love that in Louder Than Hunger, it starts with a Dear Reader letter from
yeah,
KHD Camillo, which was like, this is what it felt like, E-Train. When I read that letter, I first wept. And then second, it felt as though my favorite teacher had given me an A+ with like 500 gold stars and said, bravo, John. So, yeah.
I love that. So, as I mentioned, you've done some incredible things, but one that I was really interested to learn about was that during 2013, you were actually a member
Mm,
of the Newbery Award Committee,
I
which is a
was.
huge honor in itself, but it also sounds like a lot of pressure. So, because, you read so many books and you have to really pinpoint it down to one story or a few stories that receive the honor and one that receives the actual award. So, I guess, did you ever think that you would
Mhm.
maybe sort of have that sort of influence in the book world? And also, if
No.
there were any disagreements, maybe like as to which
Oh,
book
God.
should win, how were they resolved?
Yeah, I can't believe it was 10 years ago. Wow, 10 years ago. I was on the Newbery Committee, and I must share, you said the year, but the book that won the year I was on was Flora and Ulysses by KHD
Exactly.
Camillo. And it's what I say during school visits is that when you serve on the Newbery Committee, you read and you read and you read until it feels as though your eyes are going to start bleeding. And at that time, they would lock you in a room for 2 days, and for 2 days, you would discuss books and you would laugh over books and you would cry over books and you would manipulate each other. And at the end of the second day, there's only one book left that can win the Newbery. And then those 15 people, there's only 15 of them. It's done differently now than it was when I was on it, but you'd have to keep that a secret for like 12 hours. And it was really,
Oh.
really hard. But the best part, E-Train, was that we got to call Casey Camillo at like 6 o'clock in the morning. And we got to tell her that she had won the Newbery. And this is what she said to us. She said, but it's a book about a squirrel. She said, books about squirrels don't win the Newbery medal. And we said, Kate Camillo, that is not true. So I often tell people jokingly, it was the best year of my life and it was the worst year of my life. But it really was. It was one of the biggest honors that I got to be a part of the committee that was able to say in that year, according to these 15 people, this was the most distinguished contribution to children's literature. And what it's really helped me do, E-Train, is trust the process,
Mhm.
trust that the people in the room know what they're doing.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, it sounds like hard work, but it sounds like, really rewarding and really lovely work, trying like learning and reading all these
Oh, it
incredible
was.
stories, talking with fellow book
Yeah.
lovers. Even if you are locked in a room for 2 days, you're locked in a room
Well,
for 2 days with book lovers.
well, and the thing is, I never look at the awards in the same way. I don't, because it's a lot of work. I mean, it's you give up. I mean, a year of your life. You're not paid to be on these committees.
Right.
You do it because you love, and it's hard work. It's hard work and heart work that you get
Mhm.
to do. Yeah, and of
So
course there's disagreements to answer that, but you like there's you're not allowed to tell what happened in the room though. So,
yeah.
but I know.
Mhm. You know. So, this is a question that I ask a lot of the people that I interview. I recently integrated it into some interviews. So, my question for you is if you could choose one song that best represents your book,
Oh.
Louder Than Hunger, what song would it be and why?
Oh, that is such a good question. And you did send me questions last night, but I did not look at them. I
Mhm.
like to be surprised, but I'm so grateful you sent them because I think that's very, very important. And I respected you even more when I saw that you sent the questions. So let me I need to think for a moment though.
Alright,
So
no worries.
a song that would represent the book. So the song that came to mind first is a song that I listen to every single day, E-Train. I start every day by either making a playlist or listening to the playlist that I made before I went to bed the night before. Because I always make a playlist every day.
Mhm.
And there's one song that has been on every playlist that I've made for the last 3 years. And that song is No Day But Today, and it's Adina Menzel's version. And you've read Louder Than Hunger, so you know that Jake loves Adina Menzel's voice. And it's a version of a song called Another Day that's in the musical Rent. So it's called No Day But Today when it's Adina Menzel's version, and it's Another Day in the musical Rent. So I think No Day But Today is the anthem of my life. And I believe it helped me write a lot of Louder Than Hunger. So my winding road answer is No Day But Today.
I
That
love
one took
that
a little bit more thought because no one has asked me that.
I love that idea of creating a playlist every day, and it just feels like such a rewarding, such a great thing to wake up to and work on, and it's kind of like writing your own story, like, it's kind of like it just sounds so powerful, but
Yeah.
also,
No, it allows me to know where I was, kind of what my mood was that
yeah,
day. But music is a huge part of my writing process.
mhm,
I listened to a lot of Alanis Morissette when I was writing Louder Than Hunger, Tracy Chapman, Tina Turner,
yeah,
Sarah McLachlan, all like singers, musicians that appear in the book.
mhm,
And I know many middle schoolers, high schoolers reading the book today won't know all of those musicians who were really famous in the 1990s, but I love that it's allowing them to discover that music.
yeah, and I think a lot more people discovered Tracy Chapman after, when
Oh,
she
yeah.
came to the, Grammys last
Yep.
year, or
Yeah, for Fast Car. Yeah.
yeah. I
Yeah.
love I
Yeah.
love that more people are discovering I mean, I'm talking like I'm a 30-year-old, but I
No,
love '90s.
you're amazing.
Yeah,
Yes.
I know, I love the music from the '80s and '90s, that's probably my go-to, so
Yeah.
I love seeing
Well,
that in books.
yeah. Well, Louder Than Hunger takes place in 1996, and
Mhm,
a lot of people who are my age, I'm almost 43, when I say that that's historical fiction, they're like, "Oh, John, please don't say our teenage years are historical fiction," but they are. But
yeah,
I tried E-Train not to add too many 80s and 90s references that it would take you out of the story, but
right.
kind of strategically place that maybe you would take a break from reading the book for a moment and look up those things if you didn't know. if you didn't know about them.
I like that.
Yeah.
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 So now it's time for the final question of the interview, which makes me really sad because I loved this
Oh,
interview. But
thank you. You're amazing.
this is a question that I ask everybody that I've interviewed. It's one that I've received a lot of different answers of, and that always just makes it extra special. So no pressure. If you
Okay.
could be or meet, so if you could be or meet any book character or author, who would it be and why?
All right, I'm gonna go with somebody else's character that I did not create, and one we just talked about, which is
Yay!
Ulysses from Floor and Ulysses, because I love that squirrel so much. He has such a big heart, and he loves poetry, and he loves donuts. And when you serve on the Newbery Committee, the author gives you a gift, and this is the gift that KHD Camillo and Keith Campbell, the illustrator, gave us. And this, I'm going to read it. And it
Mhm.
says, "For the Newbery Committee from a grateful squirrel." So this poem is written by Ulysses. "Nothing would be easier without you because you are everything, all of it. Sprinkles, quirks, giant donuts, eggs sunny side up. You are the ever expanding universe to me." And then
Love
KHC
it.
Camillo signed it. It says, for John with love and thanks, KHD Camillo. So,
I
yes.
love
So,
that.
I would like to meet Ulysses and talk to him about poetry.
Um, I usually do an extra, or I guess a, an ending to this. But before I do that, you asked me a question if I on days feel like Ethan or E Train,
Yeah.
or like
Yeah.
if I kind of switch. So for those who don't know, Ethan is my real name. And oh, it's being spread. It's gonna go viral. Everybody's gonna know. Yeah. So my real name is Ethan, and I go by E-Train on the internet. And I feel like as Jake and John do with you, they both intertwine. And
Yeah.
I just love that question so much because you can feel different when you're under a different name, whether you're writing
Hmm.
with a different character or you become an alter ego. It's like a split personality sort of thing. So I think
Yeah.
that on when I do these, I feel like E-Train, but I do feel like Ethan as well. They kind of come together, make you feel whole. Even if E-Train is
Yeah.
a nickname, it does still feel like a part of me. Like when it's not necessarily even when it's just when the camera's on, When
Yeah.
reading a story, I kind of just feel that a little love, like love of books coming from both sides of me. So
Yeah.
I love
I
that
love
question.
that.
And
Yeah. Yeah. And then I'm going to quote KHD Camillo. In one of her books, she writes about being the genuine article. And you are the genuine article in all of those like situations. When you're E Train, you're the genuine article. And when you're Ethan, you're the genuine article. So
love
thank you.
that.
Thank you for answering that.
Yeah.
Because they are
And
the same person, but it's
yeah.
hard to explain, but I understand it completely.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, this has been such an amazing talk. I'm sure everybody watching or listening agrees,
Mm.
and we're so grateful that you shared your story with us.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. You are incredible. You are amazing. And as I started the interview by saying I'm very proud of you and grateful for the work that you do.
Thank you. And, this might not be much because I'm 13 and you're 43. So
43.
yeah, I know I had to bring it up again. Yeah, so
Well,
but I'm
you're
proud
the
of you
same
as
age
well.
as Jake. You're the age as Jake. Like you're the
Yeah.
same age as the main character.
So
So,
I want to tell both Jake and you that I'm proud of you, and
oh, thank
we
you.
all are. We're proud of the work that you've done, all that you've overcome, all that you have become, and yeah, you're an amazing person, and you've blossomed into somebody that's just you're changing the world one book
Oh,
at a
you
time.
too. Thank you. Thank you.
So you're bringing so much joy into the book world, and I love that. You're bringing so much joy into the worlds of so many people from all over the world. And your passion for reading, it's contagious, and it's inspired me to dive into more stories. I mean, from all the videos I've watched of you, whether it's sharing book trailers or you talking at a school, I've probably gained hundreds of book recommendations that I have an ever-growing to-be-read pile just from learning from you. And
Awesome.
this has been such a special talk. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And ditto. Ditto.
Yeah, thank you. So,
Thank you.
everybody, I always say keep on reading, but as many of you know, it's not just keep on reading. It's dive into some of John Schu's books, everybody. They are amazing. You're going to love them. And Check them out at a library, check them out at an independent bookstore, Amazon, wherever books are sold, because they're going to be there and they're going to be waiting for you. And you'll be discovering that you have a new favorite story. Trust me. So, thank you again. Stay safe, everybody. Keep on reading, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.